Hey guys, today we are going to be doing a Q&A video. So I do have my good old tablet here, which is filled with questions from you guys as well as some comments I would like to address. Now, first, before we do start, I do want to apologize if I get any of you guys' names wrong. Don't take offense to it. But the first comment comes from Broski Jr. So the first question goes, how many years have you been growing in your garden for? I originally started my garden technically in 2020. I moved into the home 2019, didn't do anything, didn't touch the yard, just focused on moving everything in, getting the inside prepared. Later in 2020, I placed my first tree, which just so happens to be actually right behind me. The tree directly overhead is the first flame Japanese maple tree, and this is the very first tree I placed in ground. So to really answer your question, it has been about 4 years. And the end of that comment, he did say give him a shout out. So shout out to Broski Jr. The next comment comes from Daniel Cabrera, I believe. And he was asking if a Japanese maple tree does become leggy in full sun. Now, this is kind of a hard question to answer because there are Japanese maple trees that put on like 5 inches of growth in a single growing season, like the Mikao Yatsubusa or Summer Go Japanese maple tree. Both of them put on very little amounts of growth, meaning they're not really going to get leggy, and they can both be placed in full sun. Now, something like the Katsura or the Flamethrower or my Grape Leaf Japanese maple tree, those are all trees that are placed in full sun. They do put on a lot of growth, but I wouldn't consider them leggy. And when it comes to preventing trees from looking a bit leggy, you're going to want to look into pruning, because pruning will really help maintain the shape of the tree. And that goes for even trees placed in part shade or trees placed in shade. Jimbo Jackson asks, where did I get my black staking system from? Now, you may be able to see it here in the background. It's actually way back there. All it is stakes that I got from Lowe's, as well as black wire or black gauge wiring. I also got that from Lowe's as well. I've been using it to cage all of my little shrubs to protect against my dogs from stumbling all over them and breaking the branches, especially the more sensitive ones. This next one is not a question. I'm gonna read it. It's pretty long, but this comes from Rose Green Sight. Now, Rose Green Sight says, love your garden. I'm looking to add more Japanese maples to my garden, and I found your tour to be very helpful. Thanks. Now, I love that, and I'm excited for you. Later on in fall, I'll be able to show you guys exactly what a lot of these trees will look like in full fall colors, because that will also help you gauge and choose which Japanese maple trees that you would like in your garden. At least you might find some of the varieties that I have very interesting as well. This next one is another comment, not a question. This comes from Rose Terry 2744. Rose pretty much says, squirrels are smart, storing up food for the winter. It's understandable why you dig them up, but I feel sorry for the squirrels when you do. Hope they fare well. Okay, she is referring to a video where I was digging up horse nut plants that were turning into trees in my garden. I did remove them because I didn't want a tree growing in my garden that I didn't place there. I also removed some of the nuts that I found as I was placing new plants in new holes that I was putting in the ground. And I wasn't gonna plop those back in the place where I put the new plant. So I tossed them in the yard waste. Now, I'm not worried for the squirrels because I did place 2 new oak trees here in the garden, both this year. One of the oaks that I placed in ground just so happened to be the Kindred Spirit. We placed that in ground, I want to say earlier this year, and we also placed in ground, that is a fruit that just fell down somewhere. Okay, and we placed in ground a Crimson Spire last year in December. Both of those trees are doing well, and I look forward to seeing the acorns form, which will help feed that wildlife that we care so much about. I do want to note that last year we had placed in ground a ton of flowering bulbs throughout the entire garden. Now, over spring, I noticed that the squirrels were going throughout the garden digging those flowering bulbs up. They would dig up the tulips, they would dig up the snowdrops, they would dig up the crocus. So at that point, the squirrels were eating well. They weren't digging up the ones they buried, at least that I know of. And they might have, because there's no guarantee that I got all of those buried nuts they placed around the garden. I only found the ones where I was placing new plants. So if that helps. Urchin Sushi 2041 says, lovely. I just placed a 10-gallon flamethrower a few days ago. Really enjoying the foliage as well. How does yours do with the colors in summer? They're referring to a video where I showed off the flamethrower redbud tree, which is actually directly behind me. In a video early in spring, it had beautiful, beautiful orange colors. And they're wondering just how it may look or how it holds up in the summertime. It actually does absolutely fantastic. We'll even bring you guys in to look at a closer look of it. I'm not really the biggest fan of the summer color as I am the spring and fall color. That's what really attracts me to that tree, as well as the new growth. I decided to get lower to the ground, but Murmur asked kind of a similar question to what we had earlier. The question goes, how long did it take for you to grow your garden? Plant you're most proud of? How does this garden brighten your day life? Okay, I'm gonna answer all three. Again, the first one was 4 years so far, or since 2020, almost 5 years now. As far as my favorite plant or most proud of plants, it's kind of hard to pinpoint because it changes throughout the season. Sometimes I'm more proud in some of the ferns, like this one that I have back here, which is a Jurassic gold fern. It puts on like these very bright yellow colors when it first emerges. Or sometimes I'm more proud of the Katsura in the first flame, because they were some of my first trees I put in ground, and they put on beautiful colors during the spring months, but then they get kind of boring in the summertime, and then back to exciting in the fall. As for the last part of that comment, I want to say that the garden is relaxing. It takes away a lot of that stress in the day-to-day. I can come out here and mow the lawn and completely feel refreshed. I can look at the trees when I just need a breath of fresh air. If I just want some excitement, I just go around and I look at all the new things appearing. I guess in short, I'm just really excited to see what's around the corner each and every single season or day. Okay, EMCB says, beautiful garden. What is that lovely pine you have near your ginkgo/daisy? Is it, I can't pronounce that name, Wellhorst, I think? And how old is it? It's not the pine you were referring to. It's actually the pine called Blue Angel. It's a more compact growing pine. Doesn't get too tall, doesn't get too wide. In fact, it's been placed in ground for about 4 years now, shortly after the Japanese maple trees I put in ground first. I do love that pine though. Puts very interesting color and goes well with the Koto no Ito that's placed nearby it as well. Costastio says, hi Fran, your maples are growing like crazy. After putting them in ground for how many years do they stay small until they take off? I only have young trees, 3 to 4 years old, so in pots, I only see 2 to 3 yearly growth. Out of curiosity, how many days per year is the temperature above 90 degrees Fahrenheit in your area? That's quite the long question. In fact, if I were to answer it, I would say usually I go by the first year they creep, second year they sproul or something like that, and third year they leap. Usually you don't see much in the first year. The second year you're going to see a little bit more. Third year, now that they're pretty established, they're going to put on a lot more growth. As far as Japanese maple trees go, it does also depend on the variety, as even in ground, Some Japanese maple trees will only put on very few inches, like we mentioned earlier, the Summer Gold and the Mikao Yatsubusa. So it's exactly as you thought. Pretty much when they're in pots, they're not going to put on as much growth as a Japanese maple tree that's in ground. A Japanese maple tree that's in ground has space for its roots to kind of go out and search for all sorts of nutrients, where a pot, it's limited and it's more dependent on you. It depends on you to provide all the nutrients and needs that it will receive, where a tree can go and search out and find its own when it's in ground. As for the last part of that question, I'm not entirely sure. I just know maybe the last few days of June we get some 90-degree days. Into about July, they start to cool down later in July. Into August, we stop receiving 90-degree days. We might have like one or two, but other than that, it usually stays within like the 80-degree range, if not less, down into the 70s. So I'm gonna say maybe a month or two of 90-degree weather, and then after that, we're pretty much good. Also, by the way, those 90-degree days are actually pretty sporadic, so I think we usually get maybe less than 15 days of 90-degree weather, and that's probably being very generous. The Retro Captain says, hostas are an old lady plant, but there are some varieties I absolutely love, like mouse ears, humpback whale, and dancing with the dragons. That last one sounds pretty nice, I'm not gonna lie. My favorite varieties of hostas just so include Francais hosta, praying hands, and curly fries. Now those are pretty average varieties. I just love them. Now I did do a video showing Little Mouse, I believe. I'm not sure if it's the same as the one that you're saying, but we have done like division videos on that maybe twice so far. I think we have on our YouTube page. And yes, I love my old lady plants, if that's what it is. Narakoa says, are those acorns on the ground? They are referring to the massive amounts of ground cover that I use, and it is hazelnut, not actually acorns. I did pick it up at a local hardware store. They do sell them by the bag. I trialed it out for a couple years, and I will say I'm not a fan. It rolls around, it's easy to kind of kick out of place unless you have an area where it's going to be confined and stuck there. I actually don't recommend it. Or unless you want to actually improve your soil drainage, it's good for that too. Blue Azor says, oh my god, are those lupins? They are massive. Yes, they are, but they're not so massive right now. I actually cut them back and dug some up. They grow like weeds around my garden. I ended up starting those from seed one year, and then I decided to let the flowers go to seed, and next you know, lupins just keep showing up everywhere. They can't be rid of. They return each and every year, even if I remove them. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I do like seeing the flowers when they do bloom every now and then, but during the late summer, they tend to get powdery mildew, and that's a look I don't really like, so I do tend to cut them back. Lasted Leather says, great job getting your Taylor to look so healthy. We had a wet winter and it's taken a step back. Hoping for the best. Now, yes, I know that Taylor does not like a lot of water, and I hope your Taylor does do well. Again, mine is placed on a slope just so that that water can run off a lot easier. And another thing when it comes to making sure that Taylor does the best it possibly can, I have mine in dappled lighting. It doesn't get a lot of sun. You can't put it in enough shade, honestly. It just does well there. Another tree similar to Taylor that I grow here in my garden is Ukikumo. It kind of does the same thing, or it likes to do its own thing. Steer away from giving it too much water, steer away from giving it too much sun. It's finicky or not too much. It's kind of hard to describe. You want to treat it differently from your other Japanese maple trees. But anyways, guys, that is enough questions for the day. And if you would like to be featured or have your question show up in the next Q&A video, ask questions, leave comments. Who knows? You might show up. See you later. Peace.